Okay, good evening, everyone. We are going to start with reports from two of my favorite areas, Dina Madden in the music department, followed by Barry Suman to give the sports report.
Great, thanks so much. So I just do want to thank you for allowing us to come on. Usually when we do this, we'll have a performance of sorts, but we had so much that went on in December. So I, put together a little bit of a sharing. If I could just get enable a screen sharing, if that's possible.
Yes, LMC, I don't have, none of us have at this point screen sharing abilities.
I just enabled it, Dina.
Thank you.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
So I'll just start with saying that music in Mamaroneck for the past 4 months, of course, has been very different, but it really has truly been exciting and filled with lots of learning opportunities, both for the students and for the teachers. And I really am truly proud of everyone's efforts and accomplishments. Teaching music, whether you're 6 to 12 feet apart, singing and playing and with a delay in Zoom really is next to impossible. But I want to just take this moment to share what some of the highlights of what the teachers and the students made possible. And they each, came up with different concepts. Before I do that, I just want to acknowledge some of our high school students for their acceptance into the statewide ensemble. We had 5 students this year accepted to virtual all-state music festival, which really is outstanding to be accepted this year. And so we're really pleased to have our 5 students, Kay McElhenney, Mackenzie Manguillo, Gabby House, Abby Tucker, and Greg Gold representing Mamaroneck in this unique year. They were part of a virtual concert in December, and we really want to congratulate them. And then for the first time this year, we had 2 sophomores, Nadia Subin and William Tucker, who were selected into the NYSBTA High School Virtual Honors Jazz Ensemble, which is really an impressive achievement. And they'll be part of a virtual experience that will happen in March. So we wish them luck as they pull things together, and we're really very proud of them. As I said, in December, many of the students and teachers pulled together concerts, and what you see are just, little snippets, or I should say, screenshots of their concerts. And so you can see, central orchestra, students creating from home. And I do want to remind everyone that our elementary music teachers are teaching fully remotely. So these students all created a virtual concert or sharing, and teachers used all these different technologies, including Soundtrap, Adobe Premiere Pro, Flipgrid, really exciting things, GarageBand, to name a few. And so I just want to share, just so that we have to have a little bit of music. This is the MAS Orchestra. They're just, this is part of what they put together for their holiday sharing. It's about 10 seconds. So while each child's in a separate box, they really, created community together, making music, and to be able to do that at the elementary was really quite exciting. You can see that we have Flipgrid, students getting really creative with what their submissions were, and middle school orchestras and bands creating things. And I'll just play a little snippet of our middle school Homics chorus singing together in the Homics auditorium and interpreting the language of peace, peace through sign language. I don't know if you're able to hear it. I'm assuming that you can, but nonetheless, it really is just so joyous, and to see everyone working together, whether they're, seeing everyone working together and creating is so exciting. At the high school level, we're really thrilled that we were able to keep the normalcy of our playbill that we presented in a virtual way, and then our concert. We put together, the teachers at the high school put together a full program that was embedded with links and musical selections. And the feedback has really been incredible for families and communities. The high school, not only did we put this out and everyone was so thrilled to be able to share it with family across, far and wide, but we've learned that it's something that we want to keep, that when we do our concert moving forward, we'd like to record each of the selections and then share it in a virtual program. And MHS was the only high school that shared a virtual concert with the coordinators of the MetLife building. And, we've been going to the MetLife building for 30 years. And so even though it was not happening this year, we were excited to still be a part of it. So we kind of were the leaders in that. Just a couple more at the high school. One of the things here that I was so excited about is many of our students really spearheaded a lot of the technology in creating and editing the virtual concert at the high school. And so we are so grateful because our teachers are learning the technologies, but to have the students, and especially some of our remote students, go ahead and do that. So it really was wonderful. This is just a snippet, and just to see the joy and excitement. This is the high school here doing Somewhere Over the Rainbow. And once again, we kept some tradition with the high school doing sleigh ride. And you can see just in this very quick snippet that you have kids in person creating, kids virtual. So you can just get a quick sense with the 10-second snippet. And one of the things that I want to highlight is you can see in this photo up at the top, you have Elise Gellert teaching her students. She's quarantined, teaching them virtually. They're all interacting. And so just to see the kids completely engaged in an assignment as she is teaching, from the big screen. So it really is outstanding what our teachers and our students were able to do. Sorry about that. And so just moving forward, we do have a lot of music more to come. Our teachers and students are getting ready for the NISMA Solo Festival, and they're really, very ambitious in planning and getting things ready for that. We have our Triad Music Honor Society getting ready and creating and getting ready for our virtual honors recital. And then through the very generous generosity of the Mamaroneck Schools Foundation, the Homics is gearing up for their implementation of World Drumming program that we are going to be incorporating. And then at the high school, through the MSF Student Grant Program, Abby Tucker had been awarded a grant for microphones that allow the music department to perform outdoors and broaden our opportunities to have students performing together. So we're hoping that as we move towards the spring, we'll get even more creative in the things that we can do with music. And so I just want to leave you with a clip from the Homics 7th grade band. So to paraphrase Rick Astley, the Mamaroneck students and teachers, never going to give you up, never going to let you down. So that's, I'll just leave you with this, and thank you again. So once again, I just want to, there is so much more that I could have shared with you. Each and every teacher has been working so hard, and the students as well, really being very creative. And it's been actually quite different, but very joyous. So thanks for letting me share.
Thanks, Dina. That was great. Always one of the highlights of a board meeting. So thanks for the music. Barry?
Hi, thank you. So I have two things I'm going to share this evening. Dina, I always appreciate your advanced technology skills. I'm still on the lower end, but working towards perfection. Fall sports this season, just like everything else, looked a lot different. So our normal huge, 20 something teams running between the high school and the Homics was down to 10 teams total, 6 varsity teams that competed this fall. And any kid that you talk to that was a part of one of those programs really felt like it was special and engaging and felt like they'll use the term regular experience. So I was very proud as department. Board of Ed, Bob, Annie, Nora, Jeremy, Sylvia, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to show you that we could do this safely and to support in whatever, parameters were put out there that you guys said, as long as it's safe, that we could take those chances. Steve Brugge from facilities, Danny and Luigi at the high school, the custodians, things changed all the time, whether it was weather related. There were just, constant management. My 2 secretaries, Gabriella and Daniela, and also invaluable this fall was Jeff Barnard. So for people who don't know, sports run from Mamaroneck Avenue at the end of Boston Post Road and Mamaroneck Avenue down at Harbor Island, all the way down to Flint Park. So we have, 4 or 5 different venues where we run games at, and maintaining all the safety protocols and having the right people in place just took a different kind of coordination this year. So thank you for everyone helping with that. And then obviously parents and athletes, for participating and giving your all and wearing your mask all the time. And every coach who just had to do things a little differently than they normally do, and just wanted to create as safe an environment as possible. So girls tennis coaches, Tim Hooker, Kayla Glazier. This fall we had All League with Reagan Aylett and Sydney Groden. MAA award winner in All League was Kate Metzendorf, and MVP and All League award winner was Kate Solomon. Every coach really said the same sentiments, very fortunate to get the season in. We got more matches in for tennis than any other team in our local regional area. Everything was local and regionalized. Boys and girls cross country, Bob Morrissey and Nick LaRosa are the coaches. All League was Hatim Bukum. MAA and All League was Jason Markopoulos. MVP, All League and All Section was Matt Doherty. Our boys cross country team was incredible this season. Between injuries and quarantines, we really didn't have our full team. We were undefeated in dual meets. We were league champions. And then we wound up placing second in the Southern Westchester League with only half our kids competing. So it really was quite a season. Girls cross country, MVP was Riley McMullen. MAA was Alta McQuillan. The captains, Riley, Laura Lee Bertini, and Jamie Saropoulos were strong, and they helped show the ropes to some of the freshmen. And the team looks promising for the future. Girls soccer, Ron Blaine, Danielle Jaycock, Scott Mealy, and Carolina Pelez. All League honorable mention, Catherine Zweifgott, Kristen Coleman, Lindsay Evans, Amanda Robinson. MAA and All League honorable mention, Mariana Day. All League, Jacinta Smith, Nicolette Arden DeSico, Jessica Bowman, Juliana Snyder. All League and All Section honorable mention, Camille Gouda. All League and All Section, Aoife O'Reilly. And then MVP, All League and All Section is Mia Castaneda. Kudos to all these are from the coaches. Kudos to all the athletes for adhering to the guidelines. We had a dedicated group of girls who loved playing soccer and trained hard. The captains did a great job providing leadership and guidance. The team played well and competed at a high level. Every one of our teams really had fairly few quarantines during the season, and when our quarantines hit was right at playoff time. But everybody kind of picked themselves up. We put together a team and we put them out there, and we played as long and as hard as far as we could. Field hockey coached by John Savage and Trish Miller. All League honorable mention, Lily Margocious and Kate Ingalls. All League, Sophia Velasco. All League and All Section honorable mention, Natalie Molland, Hannah Rogoff, Kate Marcus. All League and All Section, Ava Gristina. MAA, All League honorable mention, Golden Dozen Award, Leah Menicieri. MAA, All League, Golden Dozen, which is a Scholar Athlete Award awarded by the coaches. All League, All Section, and All State, Jacoby Candell. MAA award winner, Golden Dozen Coaches Scholarship Award, all league, all section, and all state, Amanda Zerbib. And MAA, all league, all section, all state, Con Ed, which is a Scholar Athlete Award given to one athlete in all of Westchester County once a week. The Putnam Westchester Player of the Year was Samantha Maresca. And John Savage and Trish Miller were awarded the distinction of Coaches of the Year. Mamaroneck defeated Lakeland, which on any given year is a big feat. But this victory over Lakeland during the pandemic ended their 200-plus game unbeaten streak against Section 1 opponents. This was a season where we wanted everyone to be safe and enjoy playing the game. It was a tough way to end the season. Some players and starters quarantined and unable to play in the championship game, but we made it all the way there. These kids got almost a full season worth of games in a 7-week window. And boys soccer, coaches Rich Becker, Nick Mengen, and Alejandro Victoria. All league, Alejandro Londondo and Connor Shepard. All league and all section honorable mention, Marco Keckman. MAA, all league and all section honorable mention, JM Ducot. All league, all section, Charlie Caldor. Team MVP, all league, all section, Lowhood Westchester Player of the Year nomination, James Jogas. Team MVP, all league, all section, MVP of League 1B, Section 1 Large School Player of the Year, Lowhood Westchester Player of the Year. We had 2 of our kids up against each other. And so far nominated for all state, and he's only a junior, is Milton Mancias Mangana. So that was pretty incredible. And then Rich Becker and Nick Mengen were Coaches of the Year. It was our first section title since 1972. The boys were amazing. Proved to be one of the best teams in Mamaroneck history. The coaches and the team appreciate all that was done to make their season happen. Some records and achievements from the season. We scored 46 goals this season and only gave up 4. We had 10 shutouts. Our record was 13-0-1. We were ranked by the United Soccer Coaches the first week of the season, and every week that we played, we finished the season ranked we were ranked as high at one point as number 4 in the nation, and we finished ranked number 15. We were ranked the number 1 team in Section 1 by Lowhood. That's out of all schools, all regions. I said the 2 players nominated for Lowhood Player, and it was a team that played together, that played for each other, and started day 1 and worked it all the way through the final. So it was a pretty impressive season from that note. Scholar Athlete was still awarded at the state level, and the Scholar Athlete teams, every single one of our varsity teams received the designation. So all 6 of them received the designation this fall of having 75% of their roster with over a 90 GPA. And that equated to 92 athletes. So it was a pretty impressive fall. I will give this report to Debbie Minetta and hopefully have it, posted for the public to see. It'll also be on the athletic web page for anybody who wants to see it again or may have missed it tonight. So I appreciate that. And thank you. So that was on the high school athletics front. I also wanted to be able to talk to the community and to the Board of Education about intramurals because we've never run that before. The section had canceled modified athletics, and we wanted to show support to our Homics kids, and we knew that kids were struggling, and we just wanted to get them out into the community. So first, again, with thank yous, I wanted to thank Homics administration, Dr. Saki, Mr. Andrews, Ms. Groninger, and Ms. Iannuzzi. Mike Gaida down there, the custodian, also, making things happen, getting spaces cleaned, clearing things out, having his guys adjust kind of their cleaning schedule so we could get intramurals in. And then JT Dale, who's normally one of the lower JV soccer coaches, actually was the intramural supervisor. And I knew that I was going to need help because we'd never run it before and I don't work out of that building. But the first day that it rained and we were adjusting everything at the high school, and you have Homics parents who never had intramurals before, I realized how much I needed an intramurals supervisor just to help out. So the objective of Homics intramurals, and I thought I upped my game. I put some pictures in here of our kids. The objective was to provide students with the opportunity to play. There was no cut, there was no tryout, there was no expectation for experience. Just come out, friendly activity, try something you've never done, having, supervision with certified coaches. And, every session we tried to include, some type of warm up stretching, a small degree of skills and drills, and then allow them the opportunity to play and participate. And what this did was it started at 3:15 and we would go until 4:30, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, just because Wednesdays were district-wide meeting days. At the beginning, our conversation with parents were, parents have more, you managing expectations of parents, I guess, where you said, like, this is a program where you really could come out and try something. And you get an email like, my kid's never done this before. Okay, great. This is why you do this. Like, this is an opportunity to try something. So convincing parents that, you should let your kid try something that is a little uncomfortable, let them do it. Obviously, safety was the number one priority. The same framework we used at the high school with the Department of Health standards and the New York State Public High School Athletic Association standards we used for the middle school kids. Things that we put in place, that athletes only attended intramurals on the days that they ended school in person. So if you were a PM cohort that day, you were eligible. We did open it up to remote students, but they had to pick a cohort to go with, and they could only go with that cohort on that day. So there were less than 10 students who participated as remote students, but they adhered to the same practices and principles that we did all day long for kids who come to school. They completed an attestation to show up. They had to show a green screen. They had their temperature taken, and then they were sent out to the coach. Equipment, they couldn't play without proper equipment. We were able to provide equipment for people who didn't have it, as long as they told us ahead of time. Everything was handed out and kept out. So the jersey that you see the kid wearing here, that's an orange and black. As a district, we bought those for every team sport. That was part of your equipment that you had to bring every day. That way we could set up new teams, not worry about people sharing pennies or forgetting stuff. You had to have your own stuff. We offered cross country, same as the high school. We offered the same sports that we offered at the high school. And then the first people that we kind of tapped for positions were the people who normally would coach at the Homics. And we tried to get staffing from the Homics that knew the kids that, would work with them, and they were first aid and CPR certified and trained. Communication was important. We began in October. I communicated kind of through Dr. Saki's same calendar. So that way the parents had the same colored calendar with the cohorts. They know who was supposed to come. When all was said and done, minus, a couple of weather related cancellations, each group had like 8 to 9 sessions per cohort. Intramural coaches wore face coverings. They parents were communicated through the email they provided on Family ID. One of the things, the first day that it rained, that we realized that kids who either take transportation or leave their house to get to the Homics for the afternoon session kind of need to know by 11:30. So we started making that our cutoff. That way kids weren't bringing their stuff if they didn't have intramurals. So sometimes, we wound up on the short end that whatever rain was coming through would be finished, but we made that decision confidently. And luckily it was a great fall. I mean, we really didn't have so many weather related. And we posted in multiple places. The cost of the program, we bought those pennies like I showed you, the intramural supervisor position, and then per day on the days that we ran, we had 8 coaches for approximately 18 dates. So that was the total cost of the program. These are by the numbers, the breakdown of kids. So we opened it, sorry, I think I don't know if I said this. It was all 7th and 8th graders that were eligible for intramurals. Those were the kids who would have had the opportunity to participate in athletics. These are our total numbers. So they're all pretty close. So we did have 235 kids registered. These were how many from the blue cohort, how many from the green. It was amazing that it actually broke down fairly evenly. Everything was down between Homics and Flint Park, as you saw when I listed all the coaches. So everything was close. Parents knew where to pick up. Babysitters knew where to pick up. Coaches had the responsibility of kind of delivering kids. And parents, when they signed their kid up, would say if their child was able to walk home. So there were, lots of safety measures that were put in place. And then finally, kind of some thoughts about the program. So I think the feedback that I've heard was it was an amazing opportunity for 7th and 8th graders. I know that financially those numbers are small on what the program costs, but just please understand it's not the same as an interscholastic program. Even the intramural budget wasn't fully utilized because we had coaches get quarantined, we had cancellations, we didn't, it was if they didn't play, if they didn't get paid if they didn't have intramurals that day. Our community facilities that we utilized behind the hammocks and down at Flint Park were available because there was less high school use. And the travel programs were only local to the community, so they were meeting and using the facilities less times. Intramurals was a loose commitment. If the weather was nice, the numbers were higher. If the weather was low, the numbers were lower. What we did find over time is travel kids, if intramurals and a kid had travel on the same day, they would usually go to their travel. They would almost always go to their travel and not their intramural. I think parents feel like if they pay for it, it must be a better experience. So most days I would say there was about 80 kids that participated after school. Some athletes, interestingly enough, didn't find it competitive enough. And in certain sports, some kids found it actually too competitive. They got there and they didn't feel like they were as good as the other kids. Interscholastic programs kind of have a bigger educational component that intramural programs don't. The idea of being part of something bigger than yourself, the daily commitment, the fair play, the dedication, that doesn't always happen in this intramural model. But in this given year, it really was an amazing, amazing experience. And I just wanted to make sure that the Board of Ed and the community knew that it was appreciated by the students at Hammocks, by the smiling faces that I would see every day when I would go down there. I mean, it was definitely an outlet that many of them hadn't had through the spring and into the summer. So thank you for allowing me the opportunity to present. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer, but overall, I just kind of wanted you to hear in one spot how it went.
Thanks, appreciate that, Barry, and thanks for the report on all of our athletes and coaches, and congratulations to our athletes for all their accomplishments and to our coaches for making it work. I know playing with a mask is not the same as playing without a mask. And to you, Barry, because I know that scheduling was quite challenging. So thank you for all the hoops you had to jump through to be sure that our athletes had the opportunity to play, as you said, together and for each other. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Does any board member have any questions on the intramural program?
Did anybody else hear feedback that I didn't cover? I mean, you guys are out and about, and I know when people have things to say, they tell you before they would tell me.
Oh, Barry, I'll just make a quick comment. No, I just want to echo what Rena said. Having a son who participated in on the JV soccer team this year, I can't tell you how smoothly everything went considering the environment you're operating in. So thank you for that, and thank you to all the coaches and their support. No, I only heard positive feedback about the intramural experience in the middle school. So no, I think everything that you've sort of detailed was accurate, and so it's much appreciated, and really an amazing Herculean effort to get those kids out and about, because in this environment. So thank you.
Barry, I do have one question about the intramural program. How many of those kids that ended up being regular participants were not kids who, and I guess it would really be more for 8th graders, that had not been on a team, a modified team?
You know what? I didn't compare the rosters next to each other. I could do that. I mean, I have a list of all the kids. I can say that historically, more, especially in sport of boys soccer and girls soccer, that 7th graders don't normally make the team. Like,
right. That's why I said 8. Yeah.
So any 8th graders that were there was probably only a small number of soccer players that had played as 7th graders. So if I looked at the list, the majority 8th graders. The cross country was interesting too, because again, kids know that they are or they're not a soccer player. And I found that a lot of kids just tried running, and it was great. You don't have to be super fast. I think the hardest thing, even at the high school level, was telling kids they couldn't do it. We never do that with our running sports. We always figure out a way to make it work. But with, limitations on the number of people that we could even put into Harbor Island. You couldn't just have 75 kids on the cross country team. So it really was time-based for the high school level, where the Homics intramurals, the way the numbers shook out, we could have all those kids there every day, especially with, I have 2 adult coaches. So I split that number in half by day. So there's 60 kids, there's about 30 per day. And then each coach was responsible for anywhere between 15 and 18 kids. And that's manageable down in Flint Park.
Okay, great, thank you.
I just wanted to say thank you to both of you, Dina and Barry. It's what you guys offered the kids, and your staff really went above and beyond. And like this district always does, you found ways to make it happen, and you gave opportunities to everybody. And I just want to say thank you.
Yeah, I too want to echo that. I feel like for so many kids, when the pandemic hit last March, school is all the academics, but then the sports and the music are the sort of glue that brings many children to school each day, and it's the joy for them. And so your ability to bring that back for them this fall, I think is, Herculean and amazing and very much appreciated.
We're trying for winter too, for some of it.
We can't underscore the social and emotional connections through the experience of music and athletics. And to your point, Ariana, that really was something that kids needed and look forward to. And so we appreciate that. We appreciate the coordination and just making sure that these things could operate. And we've learned some things. I know that we've learned that we can have an intramural program that really generates a lot of interest. And we learned that we can perform and really kind of adapt through different modalities and technology. So Dina, thank you for being that model of adult learning as well. And certainly the teachers who are heroic in putting together the concerts and all the support to do that. So thank you.
Okay, thank you again. Okay, we're going to move on to the consent agenda. Items to be removed from consent agenda. If a board member wishes to remove an item on the consent agenda for further discussion, a motion to remove item from the consent agenda must be made. However, once a motion and second are made for the consent agenda items listed below, simple questions can be asked regarding any of them, as you would normally do for individual resolutions. Item A, approval of minutes of the 12:15 and 12:15-20 board meeting and 12:18-20 special meeting. B, approval of personnel actions. C, approval of budget transfers. D, acceptance of bids. E, acceptance of arrangements for appropriate special programs and services as recommended by the CSE, CPSE. F, acceptance of donations and gifts. Can I have a motion?
So move, Paul.
Second, Ariana.
Okay, thank you. Before we go on to any questions people have about the consent agenda, Ariana, would you like to read donations and gifts?
Yes. I'm accepting the donation and gift of $20,000 from an anonymous donor on behalf of the Mamaroneck Union Preschool District testing program. We really would like to thank this donor for helping to continue to make this testing possible. As I think we've all seen based on our return to school, I think this has given us both a great deal of comfort and also a real opportunity to be in school in January, which I think many of us this fall weren't sure we'd make it this far. So really, really grateful to Dr. Shaps for bringing this program to us and to this donor for helping help us to maintain it moving forward.
Thank you, and I couldn't agree more. Okay, any questions on items on the consent agenda or anything, Bob, that either you or Sylvia want to speak to?
No, I not on the consent agenda, but I do want to comment, just follow up on, if I can, if you'd like me to wait on the.
I'd like you to wait till after we accept the consent agenda. All in favor? Okay, aye. Okay, Bob, go
So
ahead.
I want to take this moment just to acknowledge the incredible team effort by so many of our staff, our central office administrators, our school leaders, our district physician, Dr. Ann England, nursing supervisor Dina Murphy, all of our school nurses, Dr. Claire Reinhardt, Jesse Dancy, director of facilities, Steve Brugge, our host of clerical staff, buildings and maintenance staff, and teacher aides. Who individually and I think collectively move mountains by leading a large-scale COVID testing program. I want to just also thank our parents and students and staff for their willingness to participate and cooperate in an effort to maximize health and safety by implementing this testing program in advance of return to in-person learning. As I communicated to parents and staff, we were able to identify or confirm 40 plus cases among students and our staff. We had a number of families who agreed to participate through private testing that generated positive cases as well. I think it provided us some sense of assurance as we returned to school on Monday that for the moment, and this is a point in time assessment, we had a predictable learning environment. Dr. Mazzoni will tell you that following the Thanksgiving break, on a day-to-day basis, we were struggling to keep our schools open for in-person learning. And we appreciate the incredible kindness of that generous gift, as well as support by the board to move forward with this program. And we feel today, at least, certainly buoyed by the announcement on Monday that vaccinations for educational workers, our professional staff, and all have really been set in place. And so we see in some ways a sense of hope on the horizon. And I would say overall that this has been certainly a tremendous effort by so many people, but I think we all believed in it and believed that it would help us feel safe for the moment and at least build some momentum as we think about between the period of now and February break. So thank you to everybody. I just will say that it's interesting, and Steve Brugge mentioned that he's never been a part of something, an initiative, where everybody stepped forward and lent a hand and just wanted to do it right. And I think we did it all the way it should be done. So thank you.
Thank you, Bob, and thank you to all the staff. I think New York State could use your efforts to run their vaccination program. So you certainly all pulled this off very smoothly and made it appear as if it was simple and easy. And we know that it was neither. So thank you. And thanks to everyone. One other item, we have a resolution regarding a certain staff member. Now, therefore, pursuant to Education Law, Section 913, it is hereby resolved that the employee previously discussed in executive session is directed to report for a medical examination in order to determine the mental physical capacity of such person to perform his or her duties as an employee of the Mamaroneck Union Free School District. Said medical examination shall commence on Tuesday, January 19th at 1 p.m. via teleconference under the direction of Dr. Andrew Levin, and or any subsequent days Dr. Andrew Levin may require to complete said exam. And it is hereby further resolved that the employee is directed to produce at said medical examination any and all medical records related to the present state of his or her health for the past 3 years. Can I have a motion?
So moved, Paul.
Second?
Second, Ariana.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, Bob, we're turning it over to you for discussion of the big picture.
Thank you. Just make sure that we can be in present mode. And the beginning, so thank you. Sorry about that. So here we are, obviously returning for the new year, and at this point in time, typically we're working steadily to prepare for our budget timeline and just budget process. We're looking. I always say we have a foot in two doors. We are thinking about the present moment and the second half of the school year, and we're looking ahead, thinking about September and planning for the upcoming academic year. And just a footnote, At our next meeting, we'll present to the board the recommended academic calendar for 2021-22. And so it is an interesting moment for our administration as we're kind of thinking at what's in front of us and what's down the road. And so we thought it would be important because we want to distinguish in some respects what's different at this point in time, where normally we conduct a rollover, we are waiting for information about retirements, we're planning in our priorities and thinking about the work ahead. There are a lot of sense of uncertainty, and I think at the same time, we wanted to surface some of the bigger issues or challenges that we see that we need to discuss with the board and the community that may lead us in various directions. So this is as much as introducing or kind of surfacing some of the bigger issues, the big picture, and not necessarily, I would say, at the 1,000 foot level, but at the 30,000 foot level, because I think it's going to prompt the board to ask questions, to seek clarification around information, talk about possible strategies that we'll continue to have further discussions about. And so I want to make sure that people know this is a starting point for us. We know, looking back in time, that back in May and June, we began thinking about the what ifs of September and tried to be flexible in our thinking about all the different possibilities, scenarios, and situations. I will say at the beginning here is that it is our hope and our desire to begin the 2021-22 school year as a regular, normal school year. I'm not sure after all these months what that feels like and what I can describe, but the idea is that we'd love to say, welcome back, to begin the year with a convocation where we see each other, where we can begin to feel somewhat that we've returned to normalcy. And so with that, we'll go through this, and as board members have questions, please feel free to kind of interrupt in the sense of just pause, and we'll talk through some things. And this is, as I said, a 30,000 foot view and a general discussion. We always really point to and want to highlight at the start of any conversations about planning our mission statement. And this is where we kind of begin the process of thinking about program experience needs and what we hope to accomplish. And so it is our mission, the Mamaroneck Union Free School District, to promote intellectual engagement as an appreciation of learning as an inherently rewarding activity, and to prepare students to function as responsible citizens. And at this moment in time in our nation, that is critically important in a multicultural world. With that, we always like to just introduce and kind of prime the pump and of our thinking. And I will say that as an administrative team for many years, we focused on the writings and work of Atul Gawande. He is a renowned surgeon. He is also a renowned author. And our district-wide administrative team has really taken to heart a lot of his principles and ideas. And so this notion that better is possible, it doesn't take genius, it takes diligence. It takes moral clarity, it takes ingenuity, and above all, it takes a willingness to try. And so I would say to the board and to our community this evening that, trying to bring us together under the circumstances, under a sense of uncertainty, under the possibilities of the what ifs, that as long as we are united in our willingness to try, that we kind of ask those hard questions, that we seek information, that we talk about what's possible, we can make things better. And we live that each day in our district. We certainly try to inspire our students to believe that. And so as we start down this next journey, we hope that we are all working together to try and make things better and put things in place for what comes next. So as I said, in a few weeks where we typically kind of start to think about the budget process, we start with saying, what do we want to accomplish? Where are we in our strategic vision? What are the immediate goals and initiatives? And how do we understand what I would say, ongoing mandated responsibilities? And that translates in many respects to several major processes or really reflection on the information at hand. We typically roll over our budget to understand how do we start to initiate the process of developing a budget. As we did several months ago, we had a report from our demographer about long-term enrollment trends. There were a lot of questions about short-term and near-term enrollment projections. And so we start in many ways with just raw numbers, thinking about who is here today, who would you expect to be tomorrow. We anticipate announcements of retirements. We start to form opinions on our elementary sections as part of our neighborhood schools model, knowing that each grade at each school looks a little bit different as students advance. We continue to work on and think about new initiatives. Early in this year, with the opportunity to talk about our Pathfinder project, the design lab that we're looking forward to. We have the culinary arts area that we're looking forward to. So what are the new initiatives and use of space and programs that are down the road, but we're trying to provide a clear sense of how we get there. And then ultimately at this time, we're really, what's hanging in the balance is understanding the fiscal state of affairs. A few days ago, Governor Cuomo presented his State of the State, and to no surprise, he talked about the national and I would say state level and regional fiscal crisis and the challenges the state has around managing budgets and programs and state aid for education in the near term and where we stand. And so all of these things converge, and it's what we kind of say, this is the work ahead of us and what we typically have to think about. So that being said, tonight we really want to talk about where we are relative to some challenges or planning challenges that we think makes this point in time a little bit different. In consideration in the conversations that we'd like to engage with the board and community may feel different despite our interest to say, let's plan for and hope for a regular return to school in September. The first is this ongoing impact of the pandemic that we're going to describe tonight. And we've had many conversations publicly on how the pandemic has affected our community, our families, our students, our staff, how it's changed how we deliver instruction, but also really underscoring or emphasizing the impact as it pertains to students' social emotional well-being, the needs of programs and services, and just what this pandemic has done to each and every family and what continues to come into consideration. We've talked and will continue to just highlight the potential for moving the goalposts around safety and what we may have to consider around ongoing restrictions and guidelines for how we operate. Listening to Dr. Fauci and health experts, we know that, and again, we remain optimistic about vaccinations. We don't know, and we'll consider and talk about the potential for various scenarios around learning. And the next bullet about what that means in terms of how we deliver and think and organize instruction. There are a lot of questions about enrollment that we'll touch on tonight that may play into our thinking that really drive staffing. And finally, just to highlight the major issues that are still uncertain around school finance and overall financing. Annie, I didn't know if you were going to take over here or you want me to continue?
Either way, Bob, whatever you prefer.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say that when we refer to, and just as a point of kind of a departure, we are encouraged by the news of the Phase B, 1B vaccination that allows educational professionals and all educational workers to participate in the vaccination. There's been a lot of conversation about what this rollout of I would say herd immunity, or at least a high percentage of individuals who will participate and be vaccinated, and what that will mean in terms of our ability to kind of welcome students back and operate as normally. And so that question mark, begs to, and it begins our thinking about the multiple iterations of what we need to think and plan for relative to schools. And earlier Barry and Dina talked about the changes to the athletics and music program, and just how do you kind of take each and every aspects of the educational experience and understand how that will play out based on the success of vaccinations and on the impact of that. Similarly, we talked, tonight about the success around our testing program, how that may play into how we operate and who's in, who's out. It's interesting in talking and learning about the testing protocols. We were already talking with experts around how we track immunization, vaccinations, in how that's going to play into ensuring a safe environment. All this plays into the occupancy in September. We spent a lot of time June through August working with our architects, our consultants, figuring out square footages, the knowing about what's possible relative to the number of students that drove, in many respects, our design about our hybrid models. And so there's a lot of question marks as to whether that will still be in our, kind of horizon, and something that needs to be front and center to consider as well. And ultimately, the board and community has supported the need for a range and continuum of resources in order to operate, from ventilation systems and PPE, from dividers, all the above that plays into what's available in terms of resources for budgets. And so it's hard to imagine, think, will any of this be necessary? Will some of it be required? How it will change in terms of logistics and how we operate the schools. So I do want to kind of put out there to the board that we need to pay attention to and start thinking the variations of what's going to influence how we organize schooling, what's going to impact budgeting, and allow us to welcome back students and staff safely.
I appreciate you putting this out there, because I do think that, while we are anticipating and you're planning the budget for a full school open, as you said, in September, it would be irresponsible to not consider the very remote and bleak possibility that we won't be in a full open. So thank you for thinking about what, for all of our parents, would be a worst case scenario.
So as you said, Rena, we're planning for September with a regular school and a regular model of opening. At the same time, one of the things that we've had to work through are the variables, around space limitations, about occupancy, and the number of classes. And so I think as we did throughout June and then into the summer, and really right up to the start of school, we felt it was certainly critical for us to host, share information with our stakeholders, talk through how we were thinking about working through the various features of our historic buildings, space, and how we can start to build the models. But as Annie said, when you have a fixed model or fixed variables that you have to kind of contemplate, it caused us to make decisions around class size, around the number of students, how many sections, and what would be a schedule. And so we are certainly better prepared to understand, as things become known over several months, of what options and the creative opportunities we can have around how we organize learning. The interesting thing that has come out of this pandemic through the executive order of the governor is really our responsibility to provide options for learning. And so we know through the executive order that continued through the spring into this year that we be mindful of circumstances of students who may have issues around medical conditions, family members that are certainly susceptible to medical issues that compromise their health, multi-generational families, and the need to offer variety of options. And so to what extent will that be in play as we think about constructing models? And to what extent will we have to assign resources based on some, I would say, decision by the governor or some health restrictions that need to provide that? So we're just putting it out there that we've adapted to this blended learning model. We've learned a lot from it. And where in the past, it certainly was an exception that was more of an accommodation to one particular student based on 504 or circumstance, this has become part of our experience. And to what extent this will continue is something we put out there. Because we hire staff and assign them in our learning models, every individual is really connected to kids, and to what extent this may play into the discussion is something to consider. Annie?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. So just to build on a few of the things that Bob mentioned, we just wanted to convey to the board and the community some of the uncertainties that we are grappling with right now that we know are going to have an impact on budget development and on instructional delivery in the fall. So we know in Mamaroneck, enrollment is a perennial issue. We've, of course, had the enrollment task force that worked over a period of months and years to really do some long range projections pre-COVID. And so what we're showing here on the slide is how the landscape of the pandemic creates some big question marks for us that will be clarified over time. You know, one of the things, well, just beginning with some points about overall enrollment variability, that we've seen a lot of movement of families both into the district and out of the district. So large patterns might be families coming from New York City, looking for more space, more opportunities for children to, you know, be outdoors, and have joined our district. But then also we've seen a pattern of families from within the district who maybe have homes elsewhere or have family members elsewhere, either upstate or even in other parts of the country and beyond. So there's been a bit of flux, families moving in, families relocating, and we really don't yet know, again, depending, as Bob said, on what pace the vaccine gets out there. Will families be returning to the district and re-enrolling kids here? What about the families that have come from the city? Will they stay? Another big variable that's interesting is just the housing market. And I think we all know it makes sense that empty nesters that might have been planning to or considered selling their house and leaving the district have stayed because they've been sheltering in place. And so in some cases, if things begin to open up through the spring, will there be more inventory of houses coming onto the market, either for sale or for rent? Will that mean new families moving in? So, you know, this issue of enrollment, which always is one of our major system challenges, is there's even more flux, I guess you could say, through the conditions of the pandemic. And then just a couple of specific things that we wanted to draw the board's attention to. At the elementary level, I've been sharing with Bob, from my perspective in overseeing the homeschooling landscape, that we've had, not surprisingly, a large uptick in homeschooling. And I'm going to show you what that looks like in a minute. I'll show you those data. But we know that there are, for example, a fair number of children who would be age appropriate for kindergarten right now, kids that we might expect to be here in the system, but who are not here. Perhaps because families kept those children at home, perhaps they extended in preschool. Some of those kids are actually being homeschooled, and some may come to us just a year late. So it's possible that we might have an influx of kids, you know, with next year's kindergarten cohort and first grade cohort. We are anticipating just a potential for a little bubble, a little swell in enrollment. And then we also, based on all the factors that I mentioned up above, the overall variability, that, you know, we know in any given year when we have a swing, the arrival of, you know, twins to one school in fourth grade could make the difference between having to add a section. So the board knows that's the process that happens through the spring, through the summer. We make our preliminary projections when we develop the budget, but then we keep an eye on that all through the summer in order to determine what the final number of elementary sections is going to be. So that will be
just one quick question on that, Annie. With, let's say, a family that would have been eligible to enter K this year, but decided to stay out and would like to enter K next year because they still technically fall under sort of that calendar year timeframe. What I know is sort of, my understanding historically is that parents have sort of made that call about K versus one. You know, this year, given the possibility that there may be a much larger number, is that still totally up to parents, or will the district be weighing in on sort of where children should most appropriately be placed?
Yeah, it's a really significant question, Ariana, and that's one of the reasons that I've made Bob aware of just my observation from looking at homeschool and then also just talking with the administrators and teachers at the building level, because the board policy about class placement, we know our guidelines are that children who are, 5 by December 31st are considered age appropriate for kindergarten. But we also know there's this phenomenon that I think you're alluding to, even pre-COVID, of what we might call red shirting, where parents make a decision not to send their kid. And so I think what I'm putting forward is that whatever happens and whatever decisions the district makes about how to respond to that could potentially have some significant budget and or space implications if we do see larger than typical primary cohort sizes. So it's precisely for that question that I'm sort of putting this out there, so to speak. Technically, kindergarten isn't compulsory in New York State. So if we have a 6-year-old who arrives, let's say, comes to register over the summer, that child we would consider to be potentially age appropriate for first grade. We anticipate there are going to be families that are interested in enrolling that child in kindergarten. So these are going to be the things that we're going to have to work through. And again, not just in our system, this is very much the dialogue probably around the nation, but I know many of my colleagues in the region are talking about this as well. So there's
I think if I can just say Danny's point, that the real question mark is based on the number and the circumstances, location within the district, how is that going to play out in sections, how it's going to play in staffing, space, all the above. So there's a ripple effect relative to concentration, the numbers that we'll see, and the variations of requests and so on.
Right. And then beyond the elementary school, we wanted to draw everyone's attention, and I think this is not news because we've been looking at these cohorts, and Bob mentioned the work of the demographer for years, but we do have a notably large incoming 6th grade cohort, our current 5th graders, slated for HOMICS next year of 471 students. So I'm going to show you in a minute what those HOMICS projections look like and how that is going to dovetail I think well with the work of the HOMICS scheduling committee. And I'll explain in a moment just what the crossover of cohort size with schedule might potentially be. And then just at the high school, as always, we continue to monitor a steady and a slight enrollment increase that we've been projecting over the next several years. Okay, so first, just the homeschooling landscape, where I mentioned that there has been a significant uptick this year of families that are making that decision to educate their children at home. And you can see just grade level by grade level, school by school, how that breaks out. So just I've notified, I wanted for Bob to be aware that situations like we have currently 4 kindergartners from Chatsworth being homeschooled, 7 first graders from Murray. So if those children come back into the system, then again, we just need to be those are just examples of places where, cohort size could increase at the building level, could result in the need for additional sections, could, as we look at our, depending on what our occupancy rates are, it's all sort of an enclosed system. So if we're able to be back at 100%, that's wonderful. And we are considering, if we're planning for some kind of a hybrid model, then, keeping those class sizes down, which is a priority anytime, becomes truly a physical necessity based on what our safe occupancy rates could be. So it's just all interconnected, but this is definitely a phenomenon of a substantial increase in homeschoolers. And then the private parochial column are kids that have been in private or parochial school who then left that school to be homeschooled. And we've just received some, I think based on honestly, what people perceive to be the success of our hybrid model, I've fielded some questions from families in that category who might be thinking of sending their children to the district next year. So, previously had been in private or parochial, now being homeschooled, but potentially coming our way.
And
So
If a child, just sorry, one more question. If a child returns either from a homeschool model or from another school or comes from another school, is it up to a parent if they would like to repeat that grade, or is it up to the district?
Right. So you're asking again about class placement, and the board does have a policy on class placement. Maybe, Bob, one of the things that we'd want to bookmark from this meeting to return to in a future conversation is just to take a look at that policy, because it basically, there are the district guidelines, which I mentioned, for placement in K, and then everything falls from that in terms of a child arriving, let's say, who's age appropriate for 3rd grade or 4th grade. But the ultimate responsibility for class placement lies at the building level with the principal. And we certainly have had cases where families have been interested in having that class placement. And by that, I mean grade level placement appealed. So sometimes cases have come to Claire, to Dr. Reinhardt, or to me and or to Bob. But I would anticipate that for all the reasons that we've been discussing, there's going to be more attention to that, to grade level placement for kids coming back to the system, and that we just want to be proactive, which is one of the reasons we're bringing this up tonight.
And Annie,
Also,
just to
Anne-
comment on a perspective of the numbers 32 versus prior years, this is a significant increase in homeschooling that we would typically or normally have in any year, correct?
Yes, and also at Homix in the high school. I'm not sharing that information just because typically it's easier to absorb, children at Homix or the high school. What we see at we know with the neighborhood school model, as we were mentioning before, with a relatively small number of sections on each grade level in the neighborhood school, the difference, increase of 1 or 2 children, or the decrease, can sometimes and often does make the difference between either having to, as the board knows, add a section or collapse a section. So there are some potentially big unknowns that could have implications for numbers of sections.
And Annie, if I
Annie, is
could
there
just add,
Oh, go ahead.
I just wanted to add that any of the kids who are students with disabilities in this group, if their parents request services, we are currently giving them services. We might not be able to give them integrated co-teaching, for example, but we are giving them speech services, OT services, and anything else that we can provide. So if a parent requests it, homeschooled or not, we have to develop an IESP and service those students as well. So the parochials, all the non-publics, any homeschooling, and any on-site and any remote.
Annie, is there a time frame where they need to let us know, the homeschool families of homeschool students, if they're coming back or not?
Yeah, the answer is actually no. There is a cycle. I mean, it's typical. Of the kids that have been homeschooled historically, we have some families that are just perennial, where they make this decision for a period of years. We often hear from families at the end of the previous school year that they intend, but the process is that a parent files with my office a letter of intent to homeschool, and then they have 4 weeks from the statement of intent to submit an individualized home instruction plan for approval. But really, that can happen at any point across the school year. So that's why, again, another reason that I'm bringing this up as a challenge is that although we certainly can communicate with our homeschooling families and see what we can find out about what their intent is, but I think one of the things we know is that their decisions will likely be influenced on what the climate is around the pandemic. What's the perception of physical safety of returning to school? What does our learning model look like, right? So I can tell you that although I did receive many homeschooling applications over the summer, there were many more through the fall. I just had one today. So, it's a real moving target, so to speak. And that's why we wanted to just mention it as one of these question marks that we're grappling with right now as we plan ahead for next year.
Okay.
So this is just what I was mentioning earlier. And again, this is not news because we've been looking at these numbers with the work of the demographer over a period of time. But I did want to just draw the attention. It happens to be a nice kind of geometric pattern there, but any cohort that's highlighted. So you can see the first column is the current school year 2021, and then we go out from there. And wherever we have highlighted in orange a cohort, it's because it is substantially beyond our kind of baseline of, around 400. The HOMICS team model has been historically predicated on having, give or take, about 100 kids on a team with 4 academic teachers. So an average class size of about 25. And so the board knows that historically, when we've had fluctuations of enrollment, either increases or decreases, really off that 400 mark, we've done a variety of things, sometimes creating what has been, adding an additional part or whole team, and then contracting that or reducing that when the enrollment drops. Obviously, those kinds of decisions have enormous budget implications. And so what we're seeing here is we know that next year, the incoming 6th grade, as I mentioned, large cohort size of 471, and the current 7th grade moving to 8 has a fairly large cohort size of 449. This year, just to remind everyone, since we're in the 2021 year, the way we were able to absorb that and deal with that without adding a team has been to divide those kids in among 5 periods in a day rather than 4. So that's how we're accommodating that the current 7th grade. So I mentioned earlier that the HOMICS scheduling committee is, has been formed, and under the direction of Dr. Sacchi, will continue to work through the spring. And so there's just a very important overlap between the work of the scheduling committee, continuing to monitor enrollment, and and I imagine this is something that we'll want to also bookmark and return to in a future conversation, so we can put a few more details out there about how all these elements are potentially related, right? The cohort size, the team structure, and the HOMICS schedule, and how we ultimately are looking to enhance program and experiences for kids with, as we look to respond to these enrollment fluctuations.
Andy, quick question. So based on the fact that the previous solutions that we have partaken in would have, a fairly high impact on the budget, any early insights into what potential solutions could possibly, we're potentially work moving forward with HOMICS? I mean, I'm just looking at these raw numbers. I'm thinking the impact on class size alone, if we were to keep the model that we currently have, would probably be, I would think be in the 30, at least 30 per class, correct? I mean, I think that there would be a substantial number. So any early insights into what you guys might be thinking?
Yeah, I mean, I think the reason, again, that we wanted to put this out there on bring it to people's attention is that, just as you said, Paul, the pre-COVID HOMICS schedule has kids divided into 4, so on a team there would be, 4 math classes, so to speak, or whatever. And so what we know is that without adding, it would take the addition of a part, or, it would take certainly adding staffing if we were to revert to that pre-COVID team structure. So I'm mentioning that what's happened this year is that rather than there being, and this was largely to create lower class sizes this year in order to personalize instruction more for children, but also to meet those, the physical safety guidelines of how many kids could be potentially accommodated in a HOMICS classroom. We have on the team, rather than there being 4 classes, we actually have kids divided in 5. And so that is one way to do that. And that's essentially the schedule that we're living with this year at HOMICS. So again, I think the work of the scheduling committee, which has a great cross-section of Homics teachers, Homics administrators, and an external consultant, is going to be looking at, what are the options, and what will, how do we deal with, how do we preserve the team structure that we value so highly, and while providing the highest quality program, but recognizing that this large cohort size does mean that without a substantial staffing increase, we would not be able to revert to the schedule that we had prior to the pandemic, for example.
And if I could just add, as you can see, it going across the future years, that this roller coaster of enrollment change has an impact. And I think, we need to plan for and think and consider for September, but, based on the change year to year, that it has to play into our thinking as well, in terms of the convergence of schedule, of team model, and the delivery of instruction as well.
Yeah, and these alternating years, it looks like catch and release. You have certain staff, then what do you do the following year? Because we're dropping from, that 449 cohort is coming out, and
417 comes in.
417 comes in, yeah.
So that's one of the I think constraints, or one of the conditions that the scheduling committee is thinking about, is what is the durability, right? For exactly that reason, Rena, and we've lived this. The board knows. I think a couple of years ago, we looked at the history of Homics teams, and when we have added, when we have contracted, and just as you say, there are a lot of challenges in doing that, especially when we've had a half team, the challenge of finding highly qualified people that are willing to accept a position that is, part-time, et cetera. So we hire wonderful people, and then if the enrollment drops, and then we're contracting that team. So we've lived with a lot of different iterations of this that we've learned from, and I think we anticipate maybe wanting to return to this, especially as the scheduling committee resumes its work. And perhaps all of this has ties to the budget, which I think soon will, maybe Bob's going to ask Sylvia to do a little update, because all these things are interconnected, and hence we're sharing them more now as just these are the questions, these are the variables, but we're kind of keeping an eye on all these different variables at the same time.
Yeah, and
Annie,
go ahead, Paul.
No, and correct me if I'm wrong, Annie, but there's even variability within the cohort, correct? Because if I remember correctly, the 449 cohort currently in the 7th grade, I believe, came into the Homics was upwards of almost 480, if I remember correctly.
Correct.
Isn't that correct?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's why if you add this is only a projection, right? So
Right.
That's why if we go back to that opening slide about enrollment, there are just so many things that we don't know in terms of the patterns of families coming, going, et cetera, and enrolling their children at each level of the system.
Yep.
Yeah, I would say, going back to what Paul said, that, doing nothing is not really an option, because I would say that no one wants to see such large class sizes at the Homics.
Yeah, I mean, you can do the math that if you took that number and divided it by 16, that would be the average class size. And as I think Paul mentioned, what we're looking at here is anywhere between, let's say, 28 or close to 30. And if that's an average class size, that's obviously unacceptable. So as you said, Rena, the reason we're putting this out there is because we know we have to do something. What that something is going to have everything to do with the ongoing work of the scheduling committee, and also with, as it's a good segue perhaps, we're going to Nora first, but then ultimately to Sylvia, in terms of what will we know and when about what state aid looks like, et cetera, the many variables that go into budget development.
Right.
Thank you. So Nora, would you just, we've talked about this before, obviously going back to the opening slide around the impact of the pandemic. And I would say the continuing impact, because it is just clear to us in our conversations in dealing with all pupil services staff that this is going to continue and be in front of us for years to come.
Right. So absolutely. So as we of course recognize from all that's already been shared tonight, planning for next year is even more than just complex. There's so many variables, and all of which in their own right really could sit at the forefront of any of our planning. You know, I think not a day goes by without one of us hearing somebody say, just can't wait till things get back to normal. But recovering from this health crisis is much more than just putting things back in place where they were. There's a lot of healing and changing ahead of us that we have to acknowledge. It's not just about recreating, you know, what we had. And we need to think about the resources, the structures, the programs which will help us assess and support kids' mental health, such as perhaps continuing to strengthen our work with our community agencies, or perhaps even revisioning what a typical day looks like for a guidance counselor or a social worker. Are we functioning more in a family and community model moving forward? Our nursing services have been under great duress this year, and we really must make sure that as much as possible, we're aligned with the current status of the health crisis come September. We have to think about and establish ways to provide more intense medical and health guidance in our most diverse schools. Programming is obviously at the forefront, especially in special education, where we're nearing annual reviews, believe it or not. We're actively talking every day and looking at programs and thinking about how can we vary the intensity, the variety of the type of programming we have in response to this lost time, both within the regular school day, if we're back 100% or hybrid, but also in the summer potentially, and thinking through that. And finally, we've got to capitalize on the new professional learning, and Annie alluded to it, Dina talked about it as well. We've learned so much going through this. And we want to make sure that we capitalize on it and that we look for ways that virtual services and virtual supports and virtual assessments can open up opportunities that will make us be able to support kids more in a kind of a 24/7 model and increase our overall professional efficiency. So all those conversations have already begun in the world of student support services and have been going on really all year, but they will continue to evolve as we better understand what the next few months will bring, because all of the things that have been described prior to this factor into what we can do within the support services as well.
I also just want to say many of the innovations and different approaches around how we've adapted to the hybrid and blended model is really applicable to regular ed teaching as well. And, you know, we talked, I think, over the course of the last several meetings about how innovation has spurred creativity around how we deliver instruction, how we assess students, how we share staff, how we provide personalized learning. And so again, I think we continue to kind of bookmark changes and approaches and use that in ways. And teachers have been leading that way relative to their classroom practices. And that I would say would be to some degree a silver lining to where we are in terms of the pandemic in our just concept and construct of schooling, and what's changed and how we want to build off of that change going forward. That's for sure.
Yeah, I would love to hear at some point, the thoughts of administrators, building leaders, student support services as to some of the lessons learned and some of the things they'd like to hold on to and discovered that we could do differently and better as we go back to a fully open.
What's interesting, Rena, is that I thought at the beginning of the health crisis, how will parents ever be involved in the conversations about their kids' education? But within special education, actually, we've had a higher rate of participation in meetings. The meetings are more efficient online. Parents can, tap in and by phone, they can video in. It's been a very positive experience to move virtually, and virtual assessment through the grant we got for the foundation, all our assessments are digital right now. So we've got like the best of both worlds going on, and we're not going to step backwards in that. I don't ever foresee not being able to have virtual CSEs, quite honestly, for parents that work and can just tap in on a break, that kind of thing. We can't let ourselves just go back to what we were, because in some ways we're a little bit better by what we've had to go through.
And I think even this year, if I could say, even in the fall with back to school and other meetings, workshops where we can present in live, record, and give people the opportunity to come back and, you know, participate differently based on family situations, dynamics. And so making things certainly more available and accessible. And I think that's something we need to consider and think about in terms of change in practice.
And I just have to give a shout out once again, when I see the word nursing, our nurses have just been unbelievable throughout this. And
Absolutely.
going back into the spring and working so incredibly hard. And we see it and we greatly appreciate it.
So we wanted to just transition and ask Sylvia, maybe if possible, if not, I'll do it as well, to kind of just kind of check in where we are in the area of fiscal landscape, fiscal environment as pertains to the budget, what we're planning for, and then some of the unknowns.
Bob, you want me to speak to that?
Yeah, why don't you go ahead, Sylvia?
Sure. So the tax levy cap is, we calculated with what we know now, right? So we are expecting a CPI of about 1.5%. We've used that figure.
Sylvia, it's very hard to hear you. I don't know if it's just me, but you seem kind of low.
Is it just Christian or no?
No, it's difficult to hear you as well.
Yeah, it's a little low. Christian's right. Yeah.
Know what's causing it. I'm just not, there's no noise around me, and.
Go ahead, Sylvia. I'm sorry. I just pumped up my volume. Go ahead. Okay.
All right. Thank you. Let me know if you can't hear. If you can't, Bob, just take over if
Sure.
you can't hear me. So the tax cap, we assumed about a 1.5% CPI. Our growth factor was very low. It didn't do much to increase our tax base, and we will assume additional capital debt service, but that will increase the tax cap, but it also increases the expenditures. So I am expecting the tax levy cap percentage to be just under 2%. And that will affect our ability to grow the budget. The state aid is just an unknown. I mean, even today, talking to people from other districts saying, what are you doing? What are you doing for this year? What are you doing for the budget for next year? And some people are saying that they are presenting the budget with 3 alternatives, one being 0% decrease, one being 10%, one being 20%. It's really, we'll wait and see. Next Tuesday, the governor's budget will come out, and that will be helpful. And we'll have some more information at that time. But we do expect that state aid will be reduced for both this year, next year, and several years to come. The ending fund balance, based on where we are with expenditures and revenues, we expect to be consistent from, the June 30th, 2020 to June 30th, 2021. And, as we know, we should be trying to fund those tax tertiary reserves, as we discussed earlier with Mark Sharp and, as we've shared with you.
Sylvia, quick question. So the state aid for 2021, so is that still sort of been put in the category as withheld at this point? Is that sort of what the governor has said? Or what is the update on that?
So it's withheld, and they're not reducing it on the state aid runs, which is what we go by, but they are withholding it. So whereas for, we'll have something, for example, the UPK grant, it was approved at the full amount, and the grant came back with a sticker on it saying, please note that while your grant has been approved, payments will be reduced by 20%. So it's just, it's really difficult to know what's going to be and what's, this year and next year. And hopefully once we get into next year and hopefully all this is over, we will be able to get a grip on what will be going forward after that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia. Just to point out to the board, it's a matter now of considering where we are in the calendar and what is in the immediate future, and then what we're waiting for. As I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, we're excited to have the opportunity to encourage employees to participate in the COVID vaccination rollout. Many of I believe our staff members are set for appointments in the coming days, if not weeks. And that will start to influence our thinking about how that rollout is going to play out to the broader community between now and September. We'll have, as Sylvia mentioned, a sense of a starting point for the state budget and aids, state aid runs. So we'll have a sense of where we begin the process of forming the budget based on revenues. I want to announce and take this moment to announce that tomorrow we're going to share the news that kindergarten registration and general registration will begin on January 20th. One of the reasons why we've delayed, which had been historically anywhere from January 10th to the 15th, is that we're working to implement a new software, Oparu, which will really allow what I would say the ease of virtual registration. It provides a lot of resources for prospective families to submit documentation through use of an app through their phone, and to make ease of back and forth communication and archiving all the necessary documents and requirements and communication. So we feel this will streamline the process, it will personalize the process. And so Dr. Reinhardt, through the support of Sylvia and certainly in support of Adish Mamaroneck, our Director of Technology, we've really been now transitioning to a new software program that will, I think, help us have parents and families go through a process, knowing that we can't do any in-person registration. So all of this is going to be virtual, and we'll share that. I put down here January 21st because in his State of the State, Governor Cuomo talked about the wait and see around the federal government, this new Congress and a president relative to a bailout for states and focusing on the high costs of expenditures for COVID, for organizing school around resources and materials. And then as Nora will point out, we start the calendar of annual reviews. And so as we think about the needs of students over the next several months, a lot of this assessment of student progress, planning for programs that will take place in the spring will influence and be influenced by our delivery model and where we go. So there's a lot more to report out on. I think it was important to say as we turn in and now begin the new year, I would say in all of this is the question mark of let's aim for a regular start of school with a regular and normal school year. Let's understand and start the beginnings of discussions about the what ifs, the sense of uncertainty around various variables and circumstances. Let's plan according to a scenario. Let's develop a community where we can seek input. As you know, last spring and in the summer, we did surveys, we had conversations, we had meetings, we had opportunities for parents to engage in the process and discussions, and certainly at all levels, our school buildings, district-wide, and with the board. And so this is really, just the start. Obviously, looking at the enrollment issues, the uncertainty about who's going to come into our community, who will leave, who's going to return to the school system, and then focusing on the middle years program with that significant in-grade, the impact of the incoming sixth grade cohort is something that we need to talk about. So that's kind of just the flavor of, where we are today and what's ahead. And so I don't know if there are any comments or questions by the board at this point. One last thing, I just want to take this opportunity because I didn't do a superintendent's report. Our district equity team advisory committee met today. And again, into this is in planning into our strategic plan and year one initiatives. We have a meeting on next week of the advisory, the district equity team, where we'll start to share our priorities and work plan for between now and August. So that's just another part of this discussion. So any questions by the board, comments?
I just have one comment. I just want to let the community know that, our administrators and board members do regularly talk to our state elected officials regarding what is going on legislatively and efforts to, help our district as well as others in easing the financial burden that all of us have experienced, all of our schools have experienced this year and are concerned about for next year. So we are very active on the legislative and lobbying front. Any board members have any questions or comments?
I just, on the vaccinations beginning, just reminding the public, it's not going to be quick for the teachers. It begins, but I know from my fire department, the guys were signing up, and as of yesterday, some of them weren't getting an appointment till March. I'm hoping that I think the hope is that will accelerate, but for right now, it's not something that just because we're starting. I don't want people to think the teachers are all going to be vaccinated come the end of the month. So.
Thanks, Sam. Okay. All right. With that, we're going to go to the public participation portion of the board meeting. I'm going to read our board policy 1230. Anyone who wishes to speak may speak. Please state your first and last name and address and any organization you're representing. Any group or organization wishing to address the board must identify a single spokesperson. All speakers are to conduct themselves in a respectful and civil manner. Obscene language, libelous statements, threats of violence, statements of advocating racial, religious, or other forms of prejudice will not be tolerated. And the board will not permit in public session comments involving individual district personnel or students. Persons wishing to discuss matters involving individual district personnel or students should present their comments and/or concerns to the superintendent of schools during regular business hours. If anybody does violate the provisions, you'll be given one warning, and after for some of these, for others, you'll just be cut off. And you will, and if you continue, your comments or questions will be cut off. Questions concerning matters which are not on the agenda may be taken under consideration and addressed at a subsequent board meeting. And to the extent we can, we'll try to respond to questions that are asked and can be answered simply and very, very briefly during the meeting. Otherwise, they will be taking up, we will, hopefully be able to get back to you with some sort of a response. And with that, Debbie, are there any questions?
We do not have any questions yet. I don't know if you want to wait just a minute.
But sometimes there's a lag. Why don't we wait a couple of minutes? And I do want to say that, there's going to be a lot more detail coming. This was really, as Bob stated, a view from 30,000 feet. We're going to drill down, obviously, as we go through the budget process in terms of the budget implications. But I do appreciate the overview and heads up as to what will be coming.
Okay, so Adrian Smith would like to ask a question. Adrian?
Good evening.
I believe it's Andreen.
Yes, thanks, Rena. Just a quick question. You mentioned that you're going to be looking at resources, structures, and programs that you're planning to assess as it relates to physical and mental health. I'm wondering if you have any information regarding the timing of that and what that might look like.
So, no, I don't have a definite date for you, but in terms of a timeline, this is something that we've been doing all year long. We've had a district-wide crisis team that's composed of both district personnel as well as community agencies. So we've been working on, programs that we've been doing together. We've been talking about tools, mental health tools and rating scales that we could incorporate. individual interviews. It's really been a brainstorming kind of a collaboration. I think that, you know, a lot of it we're learning from what's going on in the area as to how do we get connected with kids in a way that we know where their vulnerabilities are. The other thing I would point to is our social work department. They've worked really hard to develop tools that they can use in interviewing families so that with Lisi Garcia, our district-wide social workers help, they can work more on a wraparound kind of model where they are doing family supports for kids across the district as opposed to just a building-based model. I don't know if that answers some of your question, Andreen, but that's some of the work that's been going on.
It does. Thank you, Nora. I just had a quick follow-up question about the social workers you just mentioned.
Sure.
Given that we anticipate that there'll be additional need for mental health services, is there a plan to increase staffing as it relates to social work?
Not right now, is because what we're finding is as we're reconfiguring, we're actually working more efficiently. So we added a social worker last year. So we've added a full-time social worker with the goal of helping us find resources that we're not tapping, but also helping us look at how we're servicing in more of a family-based model. It, you know, before this, it was the high school social worker dealt with the high school kids, with the middle school social worker did the middle school kids, but they didn't really work together to, you know, to really support the family. So that's why we added Lisi last year. And I would say with the pandemic, quite honestly, we haven't really been able to capitalize on that addition. So.
Thank you.
Sure.
Hey, Adrian. No more questions at this time.
Rena, I would just like to make a general statement.
Related to what was presented, Christian?
No, just related to what has occurred in recent events.
Yeah, I would ask that you hold that statement for now, please.
Okay, let me know.
Any other questions?
No more questions.
Okay. All right, then. Christian, is when you say recent events, this is recent events in the district?
Rena, I just wanted to thank the superintendent and the building leaders for how they addressed the events, which took
Oh, okay. All right.
over our nation's capital, and you know, really appreciate their leadership in that to that endeavor. Just encourage them to continue to address the need. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would say I appreciate our school leaders taking the opportunity to just not only speak to certainly students and faculty, but to kind of connect that with parents and community members, just to let them know the types of conversations that have certainly students and staff are engaged in, and just broadly to the community. And so we'll continue to do that.
Appreciate it, sir.
Okay, with that, I'm going to move on to announcement. We have a transportation announcement. Residents of the Mamaroneck Union Free School District that wish to request transportation for school-age children to private and parochial schools must submit their request to transportation at ardsleyschools.org by 4 p.m. on Thursday, April 1st, 2021. The form is available on the district website. To access the form, click Transportation link under Community tab and look for the application link for 2122. To be eligible for transportation, K through 8th grade students must live more than 2 and less than 15 miles from the school. 9th through 12th grade students must live more than 3 and less than 15 miles from the school. New students moving into the school district after April 1st, 2021 must apply for transportation within 30 days of establishing residency in the district. Parents who are even just considering sending their child to a non-public school, excuse me, should submit an application for every school that they may be considering. All late applications will be denied. Item 10, future business, upcoming meetings. Tuesday, January 26th, 7 p.m., Board of Education meeting, follow-up on enrollment task force and strategic planning. February 9th, 7 p.m., Board of Education study session, update from the district equity team. Tuesday, February 23rd, 7 p.m., Board of Education business meeting, topic comic schedule that relates to the scheduling, report of the scheduling committee that Annie mentioned. And the meetings will go on remotely. With that, can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved, Paul.
Second, Ariana.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, LMC, and Debbie, thank you for moderating.
Good night,
Good night,
all.
everybody. Good night.